Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a really powerful spiritual drama. It's this constant cycle of turning away from God and then somehow always being welcomed back. It's a timeless story, really, a story of rebellion and restoration. But right off the bat, our source material challenges us with a pretty fascinating question. It asks us to think about this. What if the most profound rebellion isn't some big, dramatic act of defiance, but something much quieter? A slow, subtle act of just forgetting. Let's really unpack that. All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the core drama. Then we'll get into what this rebellion of forgetting is all about. After that, we'll explore 3 different paths back. Through faith, a really surprising promise, and even praise. And then we'll see how it all fits together into one unbroken cycle. Okay, so first things first, let's set the stage. This whole spiritual drama, when you get right down to it, boils down to 2 huge opposing forces, rebellion on one side and restoration on the other. And honestly, understanding this tension is the key to everything else we're going to talk about. So you can see them here, laid out side by side. Rebellion is all about turning away, and it's rooted in forgetting, which, well, it leads to consequences. But restoration? It's the complete opposite. It's turning back to God, and it's achieved by remembering, and that path leads to grace. This simple framework is going to be our guide for this whole explainer. So, this idea of a rebellion of forgetting, what does that actually look like in practice? Well, our source material points us to this incredibly dramatic moment in the book of 1 Samuel that just illustrates the problem perfectly. Okay, so picture this. The prophet Samuel is standing before the people of Israel, and he's confronting them. They've just made this huge demand. They don't want God to be their direct ruler anymore. No, they want a human king, just like all the other nations have. On the surface, this might just sound like a political move. So why then, according to our source, was this seen as such a huge rebellion, such a great sin in God's eyes? What's the big deal? And this one line, right here, it just cuts to the heart of it. The real problem wasn't that they wanted a king. It was the reason why they wanted one. They had simply forgotten who it was that had saved them, who had guided them, who had been with them all along. And this brings us to this really critical idea our source calls spiritual amnesia. See, rebellion isn't necessarily a loud act of war. It's this quiet, creeping process of just forgetting who God is and everything he's done. This is the true root of the problem. Okay, so if the problem is forgetting, it makes sense that the solution has to be about remembering, right? And the first path to restoration that our source points to, this one from the book of Romans, is a really powerful act of reconnection. Man, after all that talk about rebellion, this line just lands with so much hope, doesn't it? It's direct, it's powerful, and it's simple. It says restoration is available to absolutely everyone, no exceptions. The source really emphasizes that this path isn't something you have to earn. It's open to everybody. It doesn't matter what your background is. It's all based on faith. And think about it. Calling on God's name is the perfect antidote to that spiritual amnesia. It's a deliberate choice, an act of remembering. Now for a really fascinating twist. Our source finds the next path to restoration in a place you would never expect. A prophecy that's just filled with judgment and doom. So the context here is the prophet Jeremiah, and he is delivering some seriously stark warnings from God. He's talking about the downfall of several nations known for their pride and for opposing God's people. I mean, it sounds like the exact opposite of a hopeful message. But then, and this is a huge but, buried inside these messages of doom, the source points out this amazing detail. Even while God is declaring judgment, he embeds a promise that this destruction is not the end of the story. I mean, listen to the specific promise to the nation of Elam. It's pretty remarkable. It shows that God's plan for restoration is so total, so absolute, that it's woven even into his judgment. It suggests that the ultimate goal is always redemption. So we've got a path of faith and a path of sovereign promise. Now let's look at the third path our source highlights. And this one's maybe the most personal, the most immediate one. The simple yet incredibly powerful act of praise. This quote from the Psalms just captures the mindset perfectly. It's this bold declaration of trust, right in the face of fear, right in the middle of darkness. The person writing this isn't pretending there's nothing to be afraid of. They're choosing to focus on something and someone much bigger. And this kind of reframes what praise even is. It's not just a song you sing when you feel happy. It's a proactive tool for spiritual recovery. It's an act of faith that literally realigns your focus, actively fighting back against that spiritual amnesia by reminding you who God is, especially when things are tough. So we've looked at the problem and 3 very different pathways back. Let's step back for a second and put all these pieces together. Let's see the complete cycle that our source material has so carefully laid out for us. And here it is, the entire journey, all in one cycle. It starts with rebellion, that spiritual amnesia, which then leads to consequences. But the story never ever ends there. A path to restoration is always provided, whether through faith, a sovereign promise, or praise. And the final step? Grace. Because even if the cycle repeats itself, grace is always there to start again. So we're left with this question. Our source gives us this theological framework, but the pattern itself, it feels deeply human, doesn't it? Whether it's in our relationships or our personal goals, or even just learning something new, we all go through these cycles of forgetting what's important, facing the consequences, and then hopefully finding a way to remember and restore. It really makes you wonder, what are the things in our own lives that we're in danger of forgetting? And how do we choose to remember?